Hello, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Hi, Nadia. Hi, Jill. And now I need to turn, there's my computer saying you've got a Zoom call now. No, really. I'm going to go and turn off Outlook so that it doesn't keep reminding me of all the things I should be doing. Good morning, Tori. How are you doing?
Hi there, Caroline. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, good. Well, it's sunny today, cold but sunny, which is always nice. And I'm just not looking forward to the mornings where it's going to be dark coming in and dark going home. Yeah, never mind. Never mind. And you, how are you feeling?
I'm full of cold, but you know, it's the weekend.
Yeah. Yes, lots of hot toddies this evening.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan.
Brilliant. Good. Okay, so what I was going to say is obviously what we were going to talk about today was long-term sickness absence and dealing with it, which we absolutely will do. But Tori's going to talk about the updates to the new scheme, which I'm hoping there's an amazing insight here, because I'm looking at it going, why would I do that? I don't know why I would do that. So yeah, Tori, over to you.
Yeah, so you're not the only one, Caroline. I think the accountants' online boards last night were full of people going, have I missed something here? Because why wouldn't we just reduce people's contracted hours? So I'll just quickly whiz through what was announced yesterday. There were quite a lot of announcements, but we're going to talk about the ones for employers. So the end of the furlough scheme has been confirmed. That's going to be the end of next month. And then from the 1st of November, we're going to have the job support scheme, which means that you can pay people for a reduced number of hours. So for example, they could work a third or more of their usual hours. They can't work less than a third and still use this scheme. So it's a third or more of their usual hours. And you as an employer would pay them for the hours that they work at their normal hourly rate. And then you'd also pay them a third of the hours that they're not working. The government would pay a third of the hours that they're not working, and the employee would give up a third of their usual salary in this new scheme, which begs the question, why would you just not reduce the hours that they work and just pay them for the bits they are working for? Because in effect, you're paying them a higher hourly rate than you are doing currently. And most people can do some kind of flexibility around hours, and your choices are probably going to be between I'll make you redundant or I'll have you for less hours, I think. And I'm sure Caroline will fill in a lot more about the legality of it, but from an accounting point of view, the maths doesn't really work. So I think it's been a bit of a strange announcement, really. I think people were expecting something slightly different or slightly more supportive, and I'm not sure in practice how many small and medium-sized businesses are going to use this scheme. Perhaps for larger employers who are wanting to hold on to staff over that period, that might come into play. And there is one other thing that's going to come into play with this, which is the bonus at the end of January for those people that you have had on furlough and you've kept as employees. There's £1,000 at the end of January coming your way. So there may be a slightly more complex calculation to put in to say, actually, if I'm going to get £1,000 back, I can afford to put aside up to £1,000, but for November, December, January, it's 3 months. So it's all a bit tight on the maths, to be honest.
Yeah.
What we have heard is that this will be the employer funding it up front. So unlike furlough, where you could apply for some money in advance and sort of wiggle around through that bit, it will be the employer makes the payments to the employee for all of their contribution and the government's contribution, government's third. And then after the RTI has been submitted, you'll then be allowed to apply for that to come back to you from HMRC. So for those employers who are really struggling with cash flow and have been using furlough on quite a tight timeline, that's not going to really work for them. So they've got to have enough cash to be able to pay for it and then ask for the money back from HMRC. I suspect it'll also be with a bit of an offset against the PAYE bills, a bit like we do with employers' allowance. So rather than it being cash coming in, you'll just knock it off what you owe HMRC.
Huh.
And alongside that, the full amount, so the guidance says the full amount of pensions and national insurance contributions will still belong to the employer to pay. What we haven't had clarity about is if that is, when they say the full amount, do they mean on 100% of the salary? Do they mean on the normal hours plus the bit the employer makes up, or the employer and the government's part? So what will be assessed for national insurance, yet to be explained to us? And I think that will be an important part, because that could be quite an expense. And what else have we had on that? Otherwise, assume that all of the rules that have applied for furlough, like how do I work out average hours, what is their usual pay, all of those kind of workings, we think they'll use the same rules that we've had for furlough, so that'll carry across. And the last thing is that you don't have to have had, so an employee doesn't have to have been furloughed to be allowed to use this scheme. So it could be people that have not had furlough at all, who could then start using the job support scheme from the 1st of November.
Yeah, and they need to. Yeah, and they need to have been on payroll. Was it the 23rd of September?
Yes, the day before yesterday. That's right.
It's like advanced after it should have. Yeah, the deadline passed. Yeah, great.
That's right. So for example, if you thought you were going to, if you suddenly thought this was a brilliant scheme and you wanted to employ somebody tomorrow to take advantage of it, you can't. Unlike furlough, where that could have been, you know, a very juicy cherry to go for, there's not much in it. So I can't imagine anyone's going to try and do that anyway. No,
exactly. Yeah, because looking at the figures, like the accountants board you were talking about, I was going, what am I missing here? I'm paying them 55% of their salary for 33% of their hours. Why would I do that? Yes.
Am I right to think that, Caroline, for most people, for most employers, they do better just to say to their employees, we've only got 60% of your normal hours worth of work. Do you want to work for 60% of your hours at your normal pay or not at all? Is that probably the conversation?
So it's going to be the conversation now, because everybody was waiting to see what the next program was going to be, if there was a program. And it's now, okay, well, can we afford to pay that? No. Okay, so either you reduce your hours, and we do that maybe temporarily, admittedly, or we're going to have to do redundancies. I can't, there's going to be very few, I think, that are going to want to pay that higher hourly rate unless they are absolutely desperate to keep people. But then those people that they're desperate to keep are in different roles anyway. I really don't see, even with that £1,000 bonus in January, I think you'd have to be, it's going to be, you know, pence as to whether it's going to be worthwhile doing, really. I think a lot of people will wait and see if they would extend furlough, because we're all eternal optimists. And it's like, yeah, no. And if you were thinking of getting rid of them, you probably do need to now, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's where we sort of fall into. The only other thing we did talk about last night was I can see happening is in those high pressure jobs, people being told, right, you're now working 3 days a week, and you're going to get not as much pay as you were getting, and the government's going to help us. But by the way, we still expect you to get 5 days worth of work done. I can definitely see that happening in those kind of jobs that aren't done by the hour, where you have a contract that says you'll work, these are your normal hours, but anything extra, we expect that too. I think that's going to happen, and there'll be a lot of pressure on people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people working from home, it's not going to affect them anyway, because if they've been able to work from home and working from home, they're just doing their normal hours anyway. That's not going to be affected by it. So it's really people who can't go into work anymore, or there's not enough work in their workplace. That's the thing. So again, it's kind of bad it is bad for the ones who aren't earning as much. Like you say, yes, the ones who are on their salary, 30,000 plus, they'll be expected to do the work, but they will be still getting that money. It's the ones who are on minimum wage who are going to be really losing out now, I think. So.
Yeah, really unfortunate.
Employers would actually be probably better off considering doing short-time working, putting that in place temporarily, then following that up with redundancies if they need to, and actually just keeping the £1,000. That is probably going to end up being a better option, and possibly even a fairer option for the employees, because you'll reduce the hours by what you need to reduce it by, and they'll be paid for the hours that they work as normal. So that might be a better option.
Yeah, okay. So if anybody has any questions, if you put them in the chat, and then we can answer them. I think that's everything at the moment. Is there anything else we need to know about? Any other great schemes that the government's going to give us as employers, Tori?
the absolute headlines. So we've got extensions on the bounce back loans or the CBILS loans from the current period to up to 10 years if you want it. And there will be options to have interest-free periods and to take repayment breaks, repayment holidays. There'll be one of those, I think, of 6 months after you've already paid back for 6 months. So that's helping on cash flow. I think for the self-employed, we've got the self-employed income support scheme. There's going to be another 2 payments coming out of that, much smaller amounts, but there is some help for self-employed people there. What else did we have? Personal tax payments have been offset to January 2022, which sounds like forever away, but that's again to help on cash flow. And on the VAT, so tourism and hospitality, the 5% VAT rate has been retained until the 31st of March. So that helps us if we're going to eat out or drink non-alcoholic drinks out, we're paying a bit less.
I hadn't noticed. Somebody mentioned it yesterday, and I'm like, oh yeah, it was supposed to be going down. I haven't noticed only 5% on any of the meals that I've been going out, because it's voluntary, isn't it, whether they actually pass it on to the consumer?
Absolutely. And I think originally the thought was that they wouldn't pass it on to the consumer and that the businesses would use it to help them through this tricky time. But then some of the larger chains, I think perhaps Pret were doing it. We're saying we'll just pass that straight on, so they reduce their prices. But for most small or independent type of outlets, there's nothing in their margin, so they're using that to help them to get through.
Yeah.
So that's been extended to 31st of March. And there is one other VAT announcement, which is the VAT deferment. So VAT wasn't paid in the April, May, June period, expected to be repaid at the beginning of next year. And that can now be spread over an 11-month repayment period. So just to help with cash flow. So yeah, it's nearly all cash flow announcements. The bonus of having had the winter economic update, I think we called that one.
Yeah.
Rather than having a budget, is that we've got no changes in income tax rates, entrepreneurs relief, which we thought might go, all of those kind of changes that we were getting a little bit anxious about has all been offset to next year. So we've got a bit of stability in the tax law just for the moment, so we can make a few more plans. But really, this advancement was all about cash flow, pushing problems away to next year.
Yeah. Okay, no, brilliant. Thank you very much. I did think I should get one of those CBILS loans and defer repayment for 10 years and then say, actually, maybe the government could just pay for it for me. That'd be great. Who knows what's going to happen in 10 years' time?
It's a long time to pay off a loan over. And they've extended, so that was meant to finish that scheme to applicants. They've actually extended that out to the 31st of December. So if people haven't chosen to take those loans, they can now apply for them.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Lovely. Thank you very much, Tori. Go and start on your hot toddies now. Yes.
I'm off.
Lovely. Bye.
See you later.
Okay, so what we're going to do is dealing with long-term sickness absence. Now, one of the things, there are a couple of things that were asked yesterday on the call. Face coverings. The plastic, well, it is plastic, isn't it? The visor that you see some people wearing that's open around the side. The UK government, UK government, Westminster hasn't said yes or no that that's adequate, but the Scottish government has said that that is an adequate face covering and counts as a face mask. So if you want to wear those, if you're in F&B, and that food and beverage, sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms, is to use that instead of an actual face mask over your nose. That's seen as perfectly adequate. Okay, so you don't need to do that. Also, you can get, and Nadia researched this yesterday, didn't you, Nadia? You can get lanyards that say, I can't wear a mask, and they cost £1.99 and can be delivered probably by Prime by tomorrow. So if you are one of the people who can't wear masks and you need to do so, then actually get one of those to stop people glaring at you, because as British people, we tend not to actually say anything. We'll just go and if you want to avoid the then and people glaring at you, then probably get yourself a lanyard. It's no official thing, you don't have to prove anything, but if you are one of those people, that's just going to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, so let me share the screen for long-term sickness absence. Sorry, 1 second. I need to just close that. Is to start the slideshow. So what we're talking about is a little bit of sickness absence, and then the difference between sickness absence and long-term sickness absence, because there is a difference there. Share screen. Yes, that one. Okay. Right. Okay. So any questions, just put them into the chat and I will get to them at the end. So long-term sickness absence. So this is a picture of Bradford. I've put Bradford up there because there's a formula that you can use to calculate whether your sickness is a problem. Sickness amongst your employees, not your own personal sickness. Now, we don't use the Bradford factor, that's what's called, the Bradford factor, very much at all, because it's a little bit, if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it probably is a duck. If you think you've got a sickness absence problem, you probably have got a sickness absence problem, and you don't really need a formula to actually define it. But if you want to have something slightly more scientific and it helps to convince your board that you do need to take action, is to use the Bradford factor, and that is the only formula you are allowed to use legally to do any calculations. We did have a client who didn't tell us about this until they wanted to dismiss somebody and said, oh, he's got 150 points on our sickness score, and we're like, what sickness score? And they had their own little thing, own little score of evaluation, and it's like, no, you can just use the Bradford factor, and it can be extremely effective, but you don't need to make up your own thing. So the Bradford factor, and I'll put all of this onto, what am I going to do? I'll put it into my YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the chat, okay? So the Bradford factor is B, and it's S squared. So S is the number of times that somebody is away over a set period, okay? The number of times they're absent, and D is the total number of days that they are absent, okay? It's usually over 52 weeks. We don't usually go back more than that. You're not really supposed to. If you have sickness records from more than 52 weeks, you're supposed to file those separately to their active personnel file. Okay, and there is a Bradford factor calculator page. If you just put that into the search engine, Bradford factor, the calculator page will come up. You don't need it. It's really easy calculation. Sorry, and it's not like redundancy calculations, which are a nightmare, but I'm going to give you some worked examples now. So if somebody's got a broken leg, they're off for 6 weeks, and that means that they're going to be off for 30 days, but it's one absence. So one absence squared, 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, even I can do that bit, that's great. But they're off for 30 days in total, so it's 1 times 30. Their factor, Bradford factor score is 30, okay? And we'll come to whether that's good or bad in a minute. That's the straightforward one. If we had somebody with a broken leg, we really wouldn't be worried about them, even though they're off for 30 days in a year, because it's a finite amount of time, okay? If somebody, however, has 1 Monday off a month, that's 12 days off a year. So you'd think, oh, 12 days is less than 30, that must be better. Well, it isn't according to this. It's the number of times they're off squared. So 12 times 12 is 144. And it's the number of days they were off, 12. So it's 144 times 12. And then it's 1,728. And I did these calculations yesterday, went, have I done something wrong? There's such a disparity between the two. It's just quite shocking. But that is the correct figure for those. And that's why those short-term absences, which can happen at any point, it's not that they say in advance, I'm going to have the first Monday off every month, because obviously you'd be disciplining them. They can be off on any Monday. That's what it's turned out to be, obviously, with hindsight. And you don't know what they're going to be doing, who has to cover for them at short notice. Somebody who's off with a broken leg, you know they're going to be off for 6 weeks. They've got their sick note, and actually you then go and find somebody to cover either for that 6 week period, or you separate the task out amongst the colleagues, and it's really straightforward. Somebody who could be coming in but might not be coming in, that's a lot more difficult to allocate their tasks and make sure that there's cover there, which is why it has a higher score. Now, this is when you should get involved. Again, the calculation is a fun thing to do, to go, oh yeah, that's definitely worse, but there's no automatic, if you get this score, you can just dismiss them because it's on the Bradford factor. That's not the case in anything to do with employment law. You still have to go through a process. Now, if they have a Bradford factor score, BF, of less than 45, you're probably fine. Like the broken leg, it's not a problem. You don't need to worry about it. You still always need to get the sick notes from the doctor or the self-certification, but you don't need to worry about it. Between 45 and 100, you definitely need to be doing your return to work conversations on the first morning they're in. The first thing, if they start at 9, you have the return to work conversation at 9 o'clock. You go through why they were off. You go through what they're going to do to make sure they're not off again, if needs be, and then keep an eye on it. Between 100 and 900, you're not only doing return to work, you are thinking about, and seriously thinking about, getting a GP's report to find out more details of their illness that you can help them with if you need to find reasonable adjustments. So you are taking an active part in that process of managing, getting more information, maybe getting occupational health involved. Over 900, you should have already got, I mean, the guy with the 12 months, that's over 12 months. So only at the end of the 12 months could you go, oh, actually, we've got a problem. But then you would be having a disciplinary meeting with them. Again, you have to follow the full process. You may, depending on what he's put on the reasons why he's off, you might have already started going for a GP's report. You can do an occupational health report and see what it is. But it's, again, it's not automatic that you can do something, and this is why it's a tool to find out more information. It's not the ultimate definition, because somebody, for example, who suffers from a chronic disability is going to have more sick days off, and probably more intermittent sick days off than somebody who's broken a leg. But that doesn't mean you can discipline them for that, okay? So it's just a factor to bear in mind. And as we found out today, obviously we're doing all our research for this, the most up-to-date figures are that in the private sector, not public sector, private sector, the average number of sick days per person per year is 6.9. So you're not talking about a huge number of sick days anyway. It's not usually the 12, it's not usually the 30, but it is something you need to bear in mind. And you need to be aware that it's what is normal to an extent in your organization. If your organization has an average of, say, 3 sick days per person per year, and somebody has 5, you're going to investigate that more than if they had, the average is 10 and they had 5. The flip side of that is if you've got everybody having 10 sick days off per year, you're going to need to investigate what's going on there. We had a situation in one of our golf clubs that they felt they had a sickness problem with one person. When we investigated it and looked at the sickness records for the last 3 years, we turned out that person was actually not a problem, but that the rest of the team had taken the whole of June off. So 1 week each, one after the other, for flu in June every year for the past 3 years. It's like, okay, that's not really believable. 1, flu, you don't often get it in June, and 2, you wouldn't have it one after the other. And the reason being, they could get 5 days off, so a week's holiday on self-certification, didn't have to prove they had flu, and that was great. And everybody took their turn, except for the person that they were investigating, because they didn't like him, so he wasn't involved in that, you see. So we changed the sickness absence procedure so that you had to get a sick note from the doctor from day 1. We'd pay for it, because you do have to pay for it, but they had to do that. Guess what? No flu in June last year. It's amazing that, isn't it? So the active lifestyle is about the fit notes. The doctor gives you a fit note, which is the modern name for sick note. Fit note is supposed to be the emphasis on them being fit for work rather than unfit for work. Okay. Once they have a fit note, the doctor will have written it for a length of time so that they are healthy and non-infectious after it. So you can't, well, you couldn't previously, and even less now. It was the exception before. I don't think that you've got any chance now of getting a GP to say, yes, this person is fit to come back to work. They do not like doing that. What the system is that the employee says, I don't feel well. They go to the GP. GP writes them off for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. At the end of that time, they would come back to work unless they've gone back to the GP again and got another sick note. You can't make them go and get something to say that they are fit to work. Okay. They can also ignore the sick note. So if it's not something contagious, because there is a duty of care involved, then you actually can say, the employee can say, I want to be back at work. I can't live on SSP. I've got a bad back. That's fine, but I can do the work. I will work it. I will make sure it's fine. So although they've been written off sick by the GP, they don't have to stay at home. Okay. That said, you do have that duty of care if they are in obvious pain, or if they are infectious and they're trying, and you know, even before coronavirus, if they had a cold, stinking cold, and they're sneezing and coughing everywhere, you would send them home because you have a duty of care to the rest of your workforce and yourself. I'm going to say you don't want to get infected with that sort of thing. So, so you can't make them get another fit note to say, yes, I am fit to go back to work. Okay. Sick pay, you have to pay SSP if somebody, so SSP is statutory sick pay if somebody qualifies. So the qualification is the same for, without getting too technical, it's the same as the national insurance boundary. So if they've earned enough to pay national insurance, they will have earned enough to pay SSP. Okay, it can be slightly more technical. But if you do that, so if they go up and down a lot, you might need to use a slightly more complicated formula, but we don't do that on a day-to-day basis, maybe in 1% of the cases. If they earn enough to pay NI, then they are going to be covered by SSP. You have to pay whatever the government says SSP is. SSP is currently £95.25 a week. If you are told to self-isolate because of track and trace coronavirus, you can claim back those 2 weeks of self-isolation from the government. You can't do that, and you don't have to pay them the statutory sick pay if they decide to self-isolate themselves. It's only if they've been told to self-isolate, or they have somebody in their house who actually has the positive test, not somebody who is self-isolating. So it doesn't, otherwise everybody would be self-isolating. So we can go through that in a minute. But the sick pay, you don't have to pay anything more than statutory sick pay unless it's in your contract. If it's in your contract, you have to pay it. You can't any longer say it's discretionary. That changed in April. So you have to say how much paid sick pay you're going to give, and if you're going to give it, other than SSP. And you can't discriminate between part-time workers and full-time workers. So you can't have 0 hours just on SSP and full-time workers on 20 days a year. That is illegal. Okay, so everybody has to have the same. Certainly, you have to have the same between the working patterns. So you could say managers get a month and everybody else gets SSP. That would be fine. But be aware, I say fine to a point, because if all your managers are white males and everybody else isn't, that's going to be a discrimination claim. So it's just easier to say, okay, it's 20 days for everybody, and the people who work less than full-time get a pro rata entitlement. Okay, so you don't get the 20 days, they just get pro rata entitlement. Okay. Holidays, yes, should we ever be allowed to actually have proper holidays again, is that they accrue holiday whilst they're on sick leave. So that doesn't stop, it also doesn't stop their continuous service accrual. These are things that carry on, and that means if you do have somebody long-term sick, you will have to pay them out their holiday entitlement at full pay, not at sickness levels, at full pay every year that they're away, okay? And that is an automatic right. Okay, you can't say, oh, well, you didn't ask me for it, therefore I'm not paying it. No, that isn't how it works. So they get that, and I know some boards, management boards, like, what, they're not doing anything, they're just sick at home, why do they need a holiday? Yes, we could discuss that for hours over several bottles of red wine, but the point is the law is such that you do accrue holiday, and if you want to go and try and argue that with a High Court judge, be my guest, that'd be great. Okay, now employee sickness. Any employee sickness, and this will lead into the long-term sickness, any employee sickness, you have to get self-certification for the first 7 calendar days, and then you have to get fit notes before you pay them any money. Do not pay them any money if they have not provided you with the evidence that they were genuinely sick. Not if they say, oh yeah, it's in the post, it'll be with you tomorrow. That's fine, I'll pay you then tomorrow when it actually comes here. We've had it happen so many times that employees have said, oh yes, I've sent it to you, oh, I gave it to my friend to put through your door, and it never turns up. The person's been paid in full for their sickness absence, and they get the money on their account, and they say, actually, yeah, no, I don't have a sick note, but I'm not coming back. I'll resign with immediate effect, but you're not getting the money back. And it's not worth going after them to get that money, because the only people who win on those things, unless it's thousands and thousands of pounds, are the lawyers. So just do not pay them until you get that evidence of what they have. The fit notes can be a little bit frustrating, as we discovered. Well, no, we've known this for years, decades, but we had one yesterday, didn't we, Nadia, that said, this guy's been off since, what, the 18th of August, and he's feeling unwell. That's what the GP wrote. He's feeling unwell. It's like, I could do that. I could be paid a GP salary and write they're feeling unwell. I'm like, how is that helpful for anything? It's ridiculous. So, but if you've got something from the GP saying they're off, you pay them in accordance with your sick pay policy, okay? You have a duty of care. So you do, if they say they want to come back to work, you check that they are able to do the work they're supposed to be doing safely. They're not going to hurt anybody else there. And if you do feel that there is a danger, either through infection or because they're not paying attention, or their medication's so strong that they can't operate heavy machinery and they need to do that, then you do need to send them home, because you need to make sure that there isn't an accident, because you will be liable for that. Now, long-term sickness is all continuous sickness for more than 4 weeks, okay? So for a standard fit note, be it genuine or otherwise, you usually get 2 weeks signed off and then another 2 weeks. Once you hit the end of that second 2 weeks, so that 4 week boundary, that's when you need to be talking to us about, okay, this is what this person's been signed off for. This is what can we do now? So we need to be doing things to get more information. Don't wait until you're 6 months or a year in, which some places do, and then go, oh, can we just fire them now? No, you've got to jump through the same hoops, whether it's at 4 weeks or at 12 months. It's going to be easier to, well, it's not actually going to be easier, it's just going to be more painful, because everybody's got used to the situation at 12 months. But you do need to do the same hoops. So get us involved early on rather than at the end. So what you need to do at the 4 week stage is we need to get a GP's report about, which is separate to a fit note. This is much more detailed, in theory anyway, where we ask the employee, it's a 3-page document, we ask them for their consent to go and speak to their GP and get more detail. Most people say yes. I think it's maybe 1 or 2 that ever said no. So that's not a problem. They don't usually refuse. And then we have a separate document, again, another 3-page document that we send to the GP saying, we have the consent, we can do this. Can you tell us whether they are classed as disabled under employment law, not the blue badge, but just under employment law? And do you think they're likely to come back to work? And are there any reasonable adjustments we could make? Now, even if they suggest reasonable adjustments, you do not have to do them if they are not viable for you. What the GP says is a suggestion, not an order. So, and this is where some of the employees get a little bit carried away, and they say to the doctor, oh, we had one actually, not an actual disabled person, but they said, okay, I'm really anxious of coronavirus, no underlying health condition, 30 years old, no children, no other commitments, really anxious. Apparently, I'm sorry, I get very cynical about these things, really anxious, got the GP to write down on her sick note that she's suffering from anxiety, and the reasonable adjustment would be that she's allowed to work from home for another month or 2. The problem being that working from home, she wasn't actually working. She wasn't doing what she needed to do. So she thought she was being really clever by getting the GP to say that to us. We then went, okay, thanks for the suggestion. No, we're not doing that. Come back into the office where everybody else is at the moment. And whereupon she resigned. So yeah, there you go.
Another good bit of information about that one is that her GP happened to be in Birmingham and she was in the south. So yes, we found that quite interesting as well.
Yeah, so he'd obviously not seen her face to face. She was in Bournemouth, he was in Birmingham. It's just, yeah, very strange. So they might be, if they do have a disability, they might well be under consultant care, in which case you would send the report request to the consultant. Those reports from consultants are usually extremely good. Really happy with consultants, not happy with GPs. You usually say, yeah, they might be, don't know, can't think of any reasonable adjustments. Yeah, they might come back, they might not. And you're like, oh, what was, and you've got to pay for that. You've got to pay, I don't know, 60, 70 pounds for that. It's, yeah, bit of a waste of time really, GP, but it's one of the hoops you have to jump through. Okay, so you get your GP report, you would then go and talk to the employee and say, right, we've got this report. The employee will have seen it as well usually. right, let's talk about coming back to work. If they say, oh, I'm not sure I can, and what we would then recommend is getting an occupational health report. This is something that you pay for again, but it's unfortunately it's more expensive. It's a private sector thing that you will pay medical professionals to go and talk to the person to find out whether they can come back and what reasonable adjustments. We do this if we have one of those silly GP's reports that says, yeah, I don't know really. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Then we say, okay, we've got to do occupational health. You would need to get the consent of the employee again to do that. And then they will do a telephone call, or they'll do Zoom as well now, or they'll do a face-to-face visit, and that's usually the best one. It would be a site visit to usually the place of work. They did do home visits. They're not keen on home visits now for understandable reasons, but they will do a site visit, and that costs about £400. Now, they're not going to falsify any findings, but they know what we're looking for, so they will be more attuned to that, whereas the GP is not. Obviously, they're totally independent, but sometimes uselessly independent. So the occupational health is a good backup to say, look, we've done everything we can. And occupational health says there's nothing we can do that will make them come back to work, and they don't know when they're going to come back to work. Okay. All of the laws that we're following, all of the guidelines that we're following are defined by case law. The Equality Act 2010 put down a definition of a disability, which is a long-term, i.e. more than 12 months, condition that affects your day-to-day life. So that's that definition. Case law, where people have been sued at the employment tribunal, that is what defines what is fair and not fair at the moment. So it's always, that changes. I mean, it doesn't change quite so quickly at the moment. There are cases being done via video link, so it's less quick change. Slower change, that's the word, slower change, if I could speak English. But there are changes. So that's what we keep up to date with, is right, as of yesterday, we could do whatever, these are the things we could do. Tomorrow, there's a new ruling, right, we can no longer do A, but we can still do B, C, D. Okay, so we know what it is. You can't say, oh, well, because 5 years ago we did this, we can still do that. That's not a given. It is changing all the time. One of the things you'd be doing when you sit down with the GP's report on the occupational health report is talking about a phased return. So if they say, yes, that is something I'll be interested in, you would normally do it on a couple of hours a day and then building up to a full day. You wouldn't do it on, say, 1 full day or 2 full days a week, because it's that full day that is so draining for somebody coming back to work. So what we have suggested to most people is that the first week they do 2 hours a day. It does depend a bit on the commute. If they've got a long commute, that's not going to work, but okay. But if 2 hours a day for the first week, you already set in stone that you will be talking on Friday afternoon before they go home to say, how did it go? Are you happy to go up to 3 hours next week, or do you want to stay at 2 hours? So you're not to say, oh yeah, let me know if it's not working for you. It is, we are absolutely having that conversation, because you need to keep on top of this. What we have found is when people, even the most obstreperous employees, are like, yeah, I'm coming back, you're not getting rid of me. After we've done the phased return, so 1 week, 2 week, 2 hours a day, then 3 hours a day, then 4 hours a day, by the end of that 3rd week, they're usually coming to us saying, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work in this role anymore. Can we come to some sort of agreement? And absolutely we can. And because they've approached us, it's a lot better value for the employer than it would be if the employer tried to get rid of them. Okay, but a phased return is the way to do it, with a part-time, with somebody coming back after long-term sickness absence, so that, and that's a reasonable adjustment. And it's we do that when employers are also very worried about the person coming back, and they're like, well, we found somebody else and we don't really want them back. And it's like, okay, but you really need to, because otherwise you're going to have to pay a lot of money to them, and actually the person decides they don't want to come back after all. So discrimination and disability. So all of these things, if you deal with it the wrong way, there is a potential disability discrimination claim. The problem with the discrimination claim at tribunal is that you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent, not the other way around. Okay, that's why it is so difficult and so time consuming if there's a discrimination claim. The average legal cost that you would normally have to bear for an unfair dismissal claim, not discrimination, is around £15,000. Discrimination requires a lot more effort to disprove it. You're talking £20,000 plus. If you win, great, but nobody else is going to pay that cost to you. So when we're advising employers, it's to bear in mind, yes, on the principle, yes, absolutely, they don't deserve any money. But if they do decide to go down the tribunal route, you are looking at paying at least £20,000 in legal costs that you will never get back, even if you win. Why not pay some of that money to the person? Because it's not just the money, it is the time and effort involved. It is not an easy process to go through. And anybody who says, oh yes, I would do that, definitely, has never been through it. It is not fun. It's not good. You don't feel that you've won, even when you do win. It's just, thank goodness that's over. It's not a pleasant situation. So what we're doing is doing everything to be fair and reasonable, not generous, fair and reasonable, to make sure there isn't a discrimination claim, or if there is a claim, that we can settle it early on for a very low amount of money. Okay. So once you have somebody who's long-term sick and you've got the GP's report and you've got the occupational health report, and they have said, actually, we don't know when they're coming back. We can't see when they're going to be able to come back, and we can't see there are any reasonable adjustments that you could make to enable them to come back. You would be sitting down with the employee, talking it through, asking them when they think they're going to be coming back. Some of them are very optimistic, like, oh yeah, I'll definitely back. Yes, I don't know when, but I will definitely be back. And others will be like, yeah, no, I can't see whether I am. Either way, if there is no definite, I'll be back on Monday at 9 o'clock, or even first of next month at 9 o'clock, I'll be back in, then you don't have to keep the role open indefinitely. Now, we would usually say that you wouldn't be looking to dismiss somebody if they've been less than 6 months absent, but it is a grey area. It depends what illness they've got and what the prognosis is from the GP and the occupational health. Now, if we are going to move to dismiss, it's called a some other substantial reason dismissal, SOSR, some other substantial reason. And it's because they can't physically do the job that you've hired them to do. So there's no redundancy pay. It is just a notice period that you are paying them. If you're paying them just a statutory notice period, which is 1 week for every completed year of service up to 12 weeks, then you actually have to pay them their full salary for that notice period. If you're paying them more than the statutory notice period, so for example, if they had 3 years service and you had them at 1 month's notice, for that 1 month, you would only pay them the sick pay amount. You wouldn't have to pay them the full amount. So there are swings and roundabouts having statutory notice period. And you would have that after the GP's report, after occupational health, you would sit down, you would be talking about it. There are at least 2 meetings you need to have in this. It's not like a redundancy process. It's not a set 3 weeks and then it's sorted. It is a lot more vague depending on what reports come in, but you aren't expected to keep the job open indefinitely. So it's then saying, okay, we can't do anything else. Therefore, unfortunately, we're going to have to dismiss you on those grounds, some other substantial reason. And that is the cheapest way to do it, rather than trying to do a redundancy, which could be a disability discrimination claim. You can do a settlement agreement, but again, you're going to have to pay them notice, plus a redundancy amount, plus something for giving up their right to sue you. And you can't performance manage somebody who's got a long-term sickness absence. You can't discipline them for being ill. That's just going to end really badly. Okay. So I'll stop the share. That's great. Now, what other things? Right. So we've got an example here. So this is what is usually happens. So somebody's been off since August 2019 with an arthritic knee, and he had full sick pay for 6 months, then SSP, and recently in a meeting. So they've been having meetings with him. So they've been doing it correctly. He has said, I don't think I'm ever going to be fit to come back to work. Okay, so that was about 2 months ago. Since then, he's now come back and said, yeah, I'm not coming back to work, but I want some money to go. It's like, So what we're working with on them is checking how up to date their GP's report is, how up to date occupational health is, so that we can actually go and have another meeting with him, a final meeting, and say, actually it's SOSR, and then you're going to be going. Okay. So it's sometimes, to be honest, the majority, by far the majority, about 95% of the time, people who are on long-term sickness are realistic about the situation. That we haven't had any, it's not a contentious area for us, but occasionally we will have somebody like this who's like, yeah, well, I'm going, but I'm not going to go quietly. It's like, well, you kind of are, because if you can't guarantee us when you're coming back, then you can't do the job. Therefore, we don't have to keep it open for you. Yes, so I wondered if there was any questions. I know it's a lot of information to take in. What I will be doing is putting the video onto the YouTube channel. That will go on as soon as it's processed on Zoom. And then you can go through and look at that again. If you have any questions about any illness that you have, I did this yesterday and we immediately got three separate sickness incidents from one of our clients. It's to ask earlier rather than later. Don't say, oh, well, they've only been off for 4 weeks, therefore we won't ask yet. If you ask now and we work out what is our plan A with this person, if they keep getting sick notes, this is what we're going to do, then everybody knows. And actually that does reassure the employee if they know that you know what you're supposed to be doing. If you wait till 6 months and then come to us and say, right, well, it's just they've been off for 6 months and I need to get rid of them now, it's not going to be a quick process. Obviously, there's a lot of frustration there for you. You need to flag it up a lot earlier to us, and we can absolutely get involved and make sure that they do whatever needs to happen happens in the correct way, so that there's no comeback for you. But it's never going to be a quick dismissal, and you do need to flag it up so that we can put things in place so that you're protected as a business. Okay, good. Okay, well, that's it for now. I will do probably another update next week. I'll send out emails. We're going to do it on the Work Employment Program. I think it is WEP. These acronyms, they need to be a bit more, you know, he needs to get a nice one. I like the flexible furlough scheme, which was FFS, which has so many different meanings in life. But any questions, absolutely send us an email or give us a ring and we'll be happy to help. The first 15 minutes is always free of charge. And then you can decide if you need any more help after that. Otherwise, I'll see you back here in the month. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.